Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima stated that Nigeria's private sector has a huge role in the country's development. Now, Shettima stated this at an event at the University of Ibadan to honor the late former governor of Oyo State, Abiola Ajimobi. Now, the vice president, represented by Bashir Maigudu, his senior special advisor, SSA on legal services, said it was already a fact that the government has limited resources to meet the demands of Nigerians. Shettima then urged Nigerians to continue to live right and do the right things peacefully with one another for the peace and unity of the country. Now, joining me on the news to discuss this is Oludare Akinlaja, a public policy expert and managing partner OAR&D company. Thank you so much for your time, Oludare.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great. I mean, interesting times you say in Nigeria. But yes. My first question to you is, how important will you say the role of the private sector is to the Nigerian economy?
Well, they will always tell you that the private sector is the lifeline of any economy. All right? It's strange in Nigeria that we have it the other way, where the public sector is the largest employer of labor. What it should be is that the private sector should be the largest employer of labor, because the private sector determines the state of your economy, it determines the buying power, it determines the earning power, it literally determines everything that happens in your economy. So the private sector is a life, is a blood, if you will say, is the oxygen that any economy breathes, because that's where you have productivity, that's where you have your ability to develop human capital. You know, so it's simply the bloodline.
But would you say that so far the Nigerian, well, I call it business ecosystem, has been favorable, to the private sector?
Well, it's harsh doing business in Nigeria because of too many things, ranging from policy inconsistencies to highly interesting and interesting economy. For instance, the Central Bank of Nigeria is it truly independent? Okay, in systems where the CBN is independent of any executive power, of any politicking, but in an environment where you have that not happening, okay, there will always be pressure on businesses. So someone can come today and bring a kind of tax, someone else comes tomorrow, takes out the tax. So policy inconsistencies has been one of the greatest challenges of the private sector. And if you don't allow your private sector to thrive, so government wants to go into the businesses that private sectors should be doing. When you have all of this, you will always have conflict.
Government wants to go into the businesses that private sector.
Yeah,
like what kind of businesses?
So, for instance, okay. I think there are many things government is doing that it should allow private sectors to do. Okay, if you look at how some developed countries, for instance, how health works, how health insurance works, these things are run by private sectors. Government should just regulate. Okay, look at our football, sports, for instance. Why should governments be owning football clubs? Okay, allow the private sector to do most of these things. So there are too many things that the public sector is, trying to partake in and take for obvious reasons. Okay, that they should allow private sectors do. And we did some, and most of what we do in Nigeria is that we say we want to allow private sectors to come into business. So you sell certain things to private sector, but you don't really allow them run it. Government is literally still watching over those kind of things. So I also understand that government should regulate, okay, but in Nigeria, the high-handedness most of the time of our government institutions can be frustrating for a lot of private sectors. So that's why you see private sectors not thriving, multiple taxations, government, you're dealing with local government councils, you're dealing with state government, you're dealing with federal. It can be pressuring on business.
Let's talk about the recent administration. We know that the current president, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has been on a lot of international platforms to say Nigeria is now open for business. All the policy, setbacks have been removed. Yeah. It's a new dawn. Yeah. The hope is renewed. Particularly for the business community. Yeah. Now, let's look at some of the policies they have put in place so far and its impact on the private business. How would you rate those policies? Well,
Nigeria is currently faced with what we call a wicked problem.
Wicked problem?
Yes. Okay. And that's why you're trying to solve one, you might unknowingly be creating another. Now, you are trying to control the movement of dollars. Let me use the aviation industry, for instance.
Good.
We know the challenge in the aviation industry where we are unable to repatriate funds to people who have those funds. Now, the issue is, if you take all that funds out, we'll have dollar scarcity, for instance. Okay, where are we going to have dollar? You know, so it's a very, very interesting thing while you're trying to solve the problem. But this is where people always get uncomfortable with government policies. All right, if you are asking private sectors, asking individuals and businesses to make sacrifices, the government also should show some sort of commitment towards allowing businesses to thrive. So the people are finding it difficult to source for forex. Custom is raising up their own tariffs on imported goods. Okay, so if you don't have the homegrown goods to solve that problem, you're going to have crazy inflation happening. So the government is supposed to be making sacrifices as the people are making the sacrifices. I think that's the challenge with what we're seeing now, is that you are asking people to make sacrifices. Is the government making enough sacrifices with its system? And
so how does the government get it right, such that at the end of the day, it encourages private sector to thrive?
So one of the things is we must unbundle how we are structured economically. I always look for an opportunity to say this. We are top-down heavy. Let me give you an example. If you give a unilateral decision on policy, how Lagos implements that policy, will it be the same thing how Ekiti will implement that policy? We must be able to design policies in such a way that businesses can thrive across Nigeria. But how we currently are structured, everybody wants to be in Lagos. If you're not in Lagos, you're in Abuja, or you're in Rivers State. What happens to the other states?
But don't you also think that it might not necessarily be a federal government problem? You might have some states that are not as, well, I call it proactive when it comes to policy, implementation, ideas and all of that compared to Lagos. Yes, we know that some states, some will say that are better advantaged, right? Lagos State is closer to the sea, the ports and all of that. But there are some other states too that you feel that, okay, if they look inward and they decide to, tap into their potential, they might also put their states, on the economic map. But I don't know if you can just respond to 30 seconds.
The challenge, sir, is that we have given governors a beautiful excuse. And their excuse is, let's wait for federal government allocation, when at the end of the day, we will still send all the work we are doing and send it to federal government. So that's a beautiful excuse. Now, it's not an excuse that you and I will condone, but we're giving them a beautiful excuse because they are telling you, we have done all the work, the federal government takes the 80% or anything, then reallocates it back to us. So why don't we just wait for federal government to give us what we're going to enjoy?
Wow, Oludare, I wish we could continue with this conversation, but we need to move. Oludare Akinlaja, thank you so much, public policy expert and also managing partner, OAR&D Company. Once again, thank you.
Thank you for having me.